Hi guys, my name Manoj Kumar Verma. Today I'm going to give some specific demo about the Spring Boot and microservices. First, before I'm going to discuss what is Spring Boot, why use the Spring Boot, and why developer prefer the Spring Boot, and what is microservices. So why Spring Boot Basic? I'm going to give some description about that. Spring Boot Basic. Spring Boot actually this is a plus version of the Spring. You can tell in a rough language, but Spring Boot have a some feature which gone to different from the Spring. So why Spring and what is the Spring Boot? Spring is always work with the many configuration, but Spring Boot have a little bit configuration is less. So Spring Boot is a good for the compare from the Spring. तो हम ये बात इसको ये कहना चाह रहे हैं कि जब स्प्रिंग बूट हम लोग जब यूज करते हैं तो उसमें हम लोग इस बात को ध्यान रखते हैं कि कम से कम कॉन्फ़िगरेशन हो. इट मींस इज a less configuration, it zero or minimal configuration of the XML file. And in Spring have a many configuration is there. I think you can tell in XML configuration and PDF file configuration and many configuration is there. So Spring Boot and Spring is some different, but now I'm going to detail about the Spring and Spring Boot. Spring and Spring Boot configuration. What is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? Okay, Spring. When you're going to write the Spring, that time you need to do the configuration, some XML configuration, some file configuration. But Spring Boot have a no any XML configuration, no any file configuration is there. When I'm going to write the Spring, that time we have need to make a when I'm going to use the Maven, that time you have need to jar have every version is Spring jar. If you're going to write the Maven of the Maven pom.xml, you can put the jar. So far that you have need to give the version with the jar. But when I'm going to write the Spring Boot, that time no need to give the version of the jar. So developer most prefer the Spring Boot. So I'm giving, please listen more again. Why Spring Boot more prefer to developer? Because when I'm going to write the code, that time no need to XML configuration, no need to any file configuration. When you are going to put the jar in pom.html, that time in Spring Boot no any version concept is there. First time we will give the which Spring Boot version is going to use. On the basis we can all take the jar from the Spring Boot repository. The Spring Boot manage the self repository. On the basis when we're going to put the Spring Boot version in pom.xml, on the basis they will take the jar. No need to give the any version of the Spring Boot. But when going to write the Spring related code, that time when you're going to put the write the Spring related code, that time we can put the version, if specific version of every things of the jar in pom.xml. Such I'm going to give the example. When I'm going to write the Hibernate, when I'm going to give the Hibernate is going to write the coding of the Hibernate in Spring, that time we will put the Spring jar in pom.xml. That time you can specify this is a 4 version, this is a 5 version, this is a 3 version. But in Spring no need to write, no need to give any version of the Spring Boot any jar ORM jar in Spring Boot. When I'm going to write any code in Spring Boot, that time no need to put any version of the ORM jars in a pom.xml. And one more specific thing is Spring. When I'm going to write the code, that time you need to do the more complex configuration in the server with the Spring. But Spring Boot is a predefined server. Tomcat is already in Spring, so no need to give, no need to give the Spring server configuration in Spring Boot. So that is very easily to handle it. When I'm going to write the Spring related code, that time we need to write the two more classes to XML configuration, servlet related and dispatcher servlet related classes is there. But if I'm going to write the Spring Boot code, no need to write any servlet and dispatcher servlet related class. That you have need to Spring Boot, you have need to write a one main method. On the main method you can proceed and write the code and start the coding. So I'm again going to give the description. When in Spring when you're going to write the code in Spring, so you need to give the XML minimum or little bit is sure XML configuration and some file configuration is there. But Spring Boot, no any XML configuration, no any file configuration is there. In Spring, server configuration is needed, but Spring Boot no any server configuration is needed uh, from our side, because Spring Boot have predefined Tomcat is defined in a Spring Boot. So when you can it take the code from the is in initializers tool, otherwise from the system, from the Eclipse or STS. So no need to give the server configuration is there. So Spring Boot Tomcat is already enabled in the Spring Boot. And third, when I'm going to write the Spring, that time you need to give the specific version of the jar. And after some time, what will be happen after some time when going to use that time? Suppose that Spring 3 is going on, Spring 4 is came, and Spring 5 is now in market. Suppose that if any code that we have developed in Spring 4, then what will be happen? Spring 5 will come. That time every jar you have need to change. But Spring Boot, we have no need to put any version related jar is there. Only Spring Boot version you can put in the pom.xml, that enough to work, and we can develop the any project you can start it there. So developer prefer the Spring Boot, that is the reason. So developer prefer the Spring Boot, no need to write any servlet or dispatcher servlet related class, and no need to write any server related configuration, no need to write, no need to put uh, any version related jars in pom.xml. So developer prefer it the Spring Boot mostly. But why? And so I'm giving the some example. If you're going to discuss about the Spring Boot, so why is Spring Boot and what is the microservices? What is Spring Boot and what is microservices? We can tell in a rough language. When you're going to write the code through the Spring Boot, whatever code will be get, that is a microservices. Means my Spring is also give the microservices, but in Spring we can tell the module. Microservices not a tell in Spring. When you write the code in Spring, that time you can tell, you can write a module. But when write the code in Spring Boot, that we can tell this is a microservices. Means microservice mean little bit small services is there can created through the Spring Boot, known as the microservices. When you going to write the code through Spring and generate a small services, that know is the module. That is the difference between Spring. We microservices, we can write the microservices through the Spring also, is possible. But you can't tell this is a microservice, we can tell this is a module. When you write the code in Spring, then you can tell this is a module. And write the code through the Spring Boot, whatever code will be generate is small type. So this is a microservices. The friends, I want to tell, I will this is a description about the Spring Boot and microservices. So next video we will be explain how to write the Spring Boot code, what is the main logic of the Spring Boot, how to proceed the write the Spring Boot, how many configuration is needed in a Spring Boot, and how many configuration file is needed, what is the configuration file, what is the name of the configuration file, what is the main class name of the Spring Boot. So we will explain in the next video. Thank you guys. So guys, I want to tell one thing some more. Sorry, I close my video, but I think we need to explain some more about the Spring Boot. Spring Boot, why come in market in Spring Boot? Why any company follow the write the any code, yeah, make the project in Spring Boot? Because Spring Boot we can easily and fast we can develop the any project. Because no, I have already tell, no need to XML configuration, no need to file configuration, no need to any concept of the version related thing, no need to any write the dispatcher server related classes. So and one things, bro, again I tell you, and in video